Okay, yeah, hello everyone. My name is Dr. Jannis Wenk. I'm from the University of Bath, and I'm chairing this session on behalf for Thomas, who can't be here this morning because he's unwell. So we have now the community engagement session. There's 5 speakers. We have the same format, so each speaker you'll have 10 minutes time for the presentation. Over there we have then the 1-minute sign. And then afterwards the speakers will go back to their seat. And then after the last speaker, then I will ask all the speakers to come up to the stage. And then we have a question and answer session. So, and now it's my pleasure to announce the first speaker, who's Jane Rampin from the Earthwatch Institute.
Right. Glasses on. So I'm going to warn you now, I think this goes over 10 minutes, but only by 40 seconds. So I'm Jane Rampin. I'm the land manager at Earthwatch, and thank you all for being here today. So I've been asked to talk to you about Earthwatch's approach to community engagement. So Earthwatch is an environmental charity that has citizen science at the centre of all that we do. Nature is in crisis, and we believe this is in part because people feel disconnected from it or feel overwhelmed and don't have the resource or knowledge to act. Earthwatch wants to do its part in creating a world where we live in balance with nature, so we work to connect people with nature and ensure more people know how to take action and have the resources to do so. Earthwatch's strengths and our assessment of where we can add most value has led us to focus in 3 main areas: cities, fresh water, and farming. I specifically work in the Nature for Cities programme, so I speak to public and private sector landowners about how to deliver their goals in environmental improvement, but always putting communities at the heart of every initiative we do. So going back to citizen science, Earthwatch is an independent research organisation, and we produce peer-reviewed research informed by citizen science. The value we place on citizen science is based on 2 assumptions. Increasing nature connectedness will directly increase pro-nature behaviours. And secondly, that when knowledge, tools and resources are accessible, people use them to take science-informed pro-nature actions. That said, we are continually testing our citizen science using a programme called MIX, Measuring the Impact of Citizen Science, developing metrics and instruments to evaluate citizen science impacts on the environment and society. So why does Earthwatch engage communities in projects? Well, we believe that unless people are connected to nature, they cannot value it. We know that connecting to nature and recognising ourselves as part of nature can create transformational change within people. If you value something, you'll fight for its survival. Earthwatch gives agency to protect nature. By way of example, we're all concerned with the quality of our nation's waterways. Earthwatch's Freshwater Watch, and now, publicity alert, the Great UK Water Blitz programmes are ways of enabling citizen scientists to, at scale, evidence the problem and give them the agency to protect what they love. Knowledge is power, and this is people power in action. Councils tell us all the time that they see the positive impacts of spending time in nature. as an essential step to reducing the negative impacts of climate and biodiversity crisis are increasingly important to those councils, and they want to bring those two elements together. Many councils are claiming to have ambitious plans for nature recovery and climate change mitigation, and they want communities to be at the very heart of this. Empowering people to bring about change is essential to deliver places where nature and people can thrive. So Earthwatch is experienced, I think I might have missed a slide there, hold on a second. So Earthwatch is experienced in community engagement and consultation, but we are learning all the time and we're adapting our programs. We received a grant from the Climate Action Fund, and we've used this specifically to better understand how to engage people and communities with nature-based projects. Part of our goal was to ensure those engaging were really a broad spectrum of citizens, and we reached out to people who were often underrepresented. One of the outcomes of this project has been the Earthwatch Community Charter, which puts people at the heart of all our projects. This is quite small, but if anybody's got any questions on it, but it's really about putting people at the very centre. I will raise that this does have its challenges at times. So why does citizen science work? Citizen science is basically a tool which gives positive feedback loops. It creates positive feedback loops. Let's take Freshwater Watch as an example. Freshwater Watch, there are some areas in the country where Freshwater Watch citizen scientists are collecting and uploading robust data in greater quantities than the Environment Agency. Earthwatch analyses the data, creating tangible evidence to allow community groups to push for change. One Earthwatch volunteer recently said, "We have to start treating our waterways with the respect they deserve. Solving the problem will require policy changes and innovative technologies. But the power of community-based initiatives should not be underestimated." We're now upscaling this particular approach via the Great UK Water Blitz. This starts on the 7th and runs to the 10th of June. Please sign up to it if you're concerned about your waterways and get out there, well, not your waterways, but the waterways, and get out there and collect some data. The citizen science that we run around tiny forests, one of our other programs for cities, has a very different purpose. The purpose being to connect people with nature. Our approach is centred around citizen science, training people to collect data and upload it to the Tiny Forest portal. Again, the work we have done through the Climate Action Fund, engaging underrepresented groups, has, however, taught us that we need to widen the appeal, as many of our constituents see science on its own as a barrier to them getting involved. This year, we have launched Discovery Days, a chance for communities to discover tiny forest citizen science and for us to discover what motivates communities. The science continues alongside yoga, reading, art, play, chatter. Oops, that shouldn't have started. Chatter, and yes, there's food. I wanted to share with you a short video of some of the community events that we've organised around tiny forests with a glance at some of the Freshwater Watch monitoring. So now let's see if it, oops, now we're going backwards. Sorry, I hope I haven't messed this up. No, I think it might just start. Charlotte? I'm not sure how it's... Oh, it started, thank you. Sorry about this. So the first slide showed people up to their knees in mud planting trees. So tiny forests are the planting of 600 native trees on a 200-metre squared urban site. We've planted in places as diverse as drug rehabilitation centres, to schools and mental health hospitals. Regular science days encourage volunteers to collect data on the positive impacts of their actions and care for the trees that they have planted. Volunteers visit the tiny forests monitoring carbon sequestration, biodiversity, thermal comfort and flood mitigation, uploading data onto the Tiny Forest portal for analysis. We work with schools across the country, training teachers to use tiny forests as an outside learning resource and providing curriculum-based learning material. The ongoing engagement creates valued places where people meet, stretch, celebrate, and relax. I've got to wait for this now to catch up slightly. So this is just citizen science in action, people doing all of the required monitoring. Still more focus. I'll carry on. Freshwater Watch looks at levels of nitrates and phosphates in water. All the data is uploaded onto the Earthwatch portal, analysed and fed back to groups. This can help inform behaviour. For example, getting farmers involved to see the impact of phosphate runoff or animals grazing alongside watercourses. I just want to touch very quickly on what we're learning. We're adapting our approach all the time to hear why communities value their green space and how they feel about nature and the biodiversity and climate crisis. And also how they could imagine seeing their green spaces improved and enabling them to be actively involved in this transformation. Research is showing that emotional and philosophical connection, those inner connections, are the deepest levers for change. We notice that being in an inspiring place encourages broader perspectives in volunteers and a sense of accountability towards nature. It leaves people feeling passionate about the subject and more committed to act. Better outcomes are delivered by early consultation between landowner, community, and Earthwatch sees itself as a facilitator to that conversation. We've learned that consultation is less about finding solutions than finding out what is important to communities, enabling that to happen. It's all about creating a valued space, making volunteers a valued part of the team and showing them gratitude is essential for their long-term engagement. You have to enable people to effect change in their area. They have to feel they have agency. I was also asked to talk very quickly about how we keep communities engaged. Well, Earthwatch's projects don't end with a tree planting day. In fact, this day is often the start of a transformational journey where people feel empowered, encouraged, or simply more resilient. Earthwatch's projects evolve around the community and they adapt to suit the community's aims. Ultimately, Earthwatch's aim is that community will really take ownership of these spaces for nature to thrive, and that the communities will continue almost independently, with us supporting in the background and facilitating the projects that they value and give priority to.
Jane, thank you so much for your presentation. So please remind your questions towards the end then of the session where we have a panel discussion. Our next speaker is Ben McCallan from the Zero Carbon Guildford organization. The stage is yours.
Yeah, hi everyone, my name's Ben. I'm one of the people who set up the charity Zero Carbon Guildford. Used to be the chair of it until I stood down. I'm also, my paid job, we're pretty much all volunteers there, my paid job is that I'm the engagement lead across climate change, natural environment, strategic energy at Surrey County Council. So I've sort of got two hats on, but I'm going to be chatting from the Zero perspective of what we've been trying to do on green-blue infrastructure in Surrey, specifically Guildford, I suppose more for reasons I'll come on to in a sec. And how we've been teaming up. So just a little bit about who we are, not dissimilar activities to what James just described. So we run a town centre. We don't have a good word for it, sort of a climate hub. We don't really like that term, but we run we took over an old building on the high street in Guildford, and it acts as a focal point for a lot of the activities we do. So we collect surplus food, redistribute it, we have active travel projects. We also do water science, citizen science water testing, and we've actually just, in partnership with Uni of Surrey, opened a community water lab, so we can now test for E. coli as well in our local waterways. And the Uni of Surrey validates it. It's not good. It's, as you can expect from most of the crap being pumped into our rivers at the moment. The advisable level for swimming, I'm going off topic here, but just while I'm here, the advisable level for sort of getting in the river is about 1,000 CFU per 100 mil or whatever it is, and the tests are coming back at 17,000, so it's not great. I've gone off on a tangent there, but remember that it's important for petitioning whoever's in charge of your local waterways. So that's one part of what we do. The second is that we run quite a big, that stands for Home Energy Advice Task Force. We train local residents up and they go out, do thermal imaging for their neighbours and communities, and then we signpost them to funding for retrofit energy efficiency, give them remedial measures for draft proofing, radiator foil, etc. And the third part is that we run Surrey's Sustainable Business Network, so trying to help small and medium enterprises to decarbonise, create and deliver net zero plans. So we're quite busy, we do quite a lot. One of the things that we're looking which we're trying to do, which is what I'm here to talk about today, is that just before I started at the council a couple of years ago, SCC commissioned Surrey Wildlife Trust to map out potential areas for urban greening across Surrey. So they mapped 18 of those. There's only 15 on this map because 3 were already in neighbourhood plans at a smaller scale. So there's 18 of these mapped out, and what the point is to obviously look at the urban areas across Surrey and see how we can reconnect some of the fractured habitats. Surrey, as you probably know, is a pretty wooded county, which often actually makes a lot of the challenges harder because you drive through the countryside and you forget about things like nature loss, biodiversity decline, etc. And Surrey's biodiversity decline is higher than the national average, possibly partly because we started from a higher baseline. We're the most wooded county, as I say, and we've had 11% of our native species go extinct in the last few decades, which a lot of people locally don't really realise. So we've got some good motivating factors. People are generally pretty concerned about nature and wildlife. If anyone's seen the Britain Talks climate research across their 7 persona types, concern for nature and wildlife is the top motivating factor for 6 out of their 7 segments. So it is a good way to motivate people. And although this is talking about biodiversity, these URBOAs is what it's called, Urban Biodiversity Opportunity Areas, there's obviously a huge number of co-benefits that have already been talked about today, air quality, flood prevention, etc. So we took one of these areas in Guildford, started working together across a number of organisations to trial an engagement pilot to see what we could do. So let's say funding's pretty limited. And as Jay mentioned, obviously we've got local nature recovery strategies developing across the country at the moment. I think there's 49 of them. SCC, Surrey County Council, is the statutory body delivering the one in Surrey. Let's say there was not a lot of funding, which there's not at the minute. It's pretty difficult for councils. What we could actually do if funding was really limited. So we did a load of engagement on this, and the enthusiasm for it was really high. We thought this is is gonna go pretty well. It hasn't so far, just to give you a spoiler there. An example here is, like this is the National Landscape, formerly AOMB. That's ancient woodland, the pink bit at the top. So you can see the green corridors here that have been mapped out by Surrey Wildlife Trust. So we started engaging on this, going out to residents, businesses, working with the BID, the Business Improvement District. And although the community side of it there's a lot of enthusiasm and it's quite easy to get some of that going because people have their own gardens, it's quite cheap to make interventions for nature in your own gardens. If you think about an urban space, a lot of the most sort of dense grey part of it is businesses. And so this is where we're really struggling to get much action happening. So far, we've really only managed to get 3 things going. That's the Sandfield Primary School, which Prashant spoke about in his talk before, which we teamed up on. We are trying to get a living pillar up and running with Scottscape. Angus isn't here, is he? No, he was here last year. You might have seen one of these if you were at the conference at Uni of Surrey last year, one of these giant living pillars. And if you walk down through Clapham now, they've done loads through one of the roads there, Northcote Road, I think. They look great. And then next Friday, we're about to put a sedum roof on a nursery locally. So far, that's all we've actually managed to get going. And all 3 of these things have been from funding. So the school came through Reclaim Network. I got funding for the nursery, and the pillar is coming through funding from SCC. So those are the only things we've actually managed to make happen so far. And part of the reason for this is this isn't trumpet blowing here, by the way. I'm just trying to demonstrate what we do as a charity. So last year we won the Innovative UK Community Project. We just got a 350 grand National Lottery grant. We work all our messaging around Britain Talks climate research. So that has been like a bit of a light bulb in terms of how you engage with that. And we've got a great range of stakeholders engaged. And our projects are pretty successful. So from our Home Energy Advice Task Force, this is the feedback. It's got 4.92 star out of 5 rating, so it's going down well. But we've also got 76% of people saying the service is they're more likely to install significant retrofit measures after we've delivered the service. So again, I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, but in most projects and engagement, we seem to be like, we're not claiming we've cracked it all entirely, but we do all right. And yet we're still really struggling with this one. And so some of the things that we think are a bit of the problem, and I sort of came here, not just to moan, I realise it sounds a bit like I'm moaning, but to try and bring up how we can work together to try and solve some of these solutions. So firstly, businesses just won't spend the money to put some of these interventions in. The independents and the little businesses within the Business Improvement District particularly can't afford it, and the bigger businesses, there's not their head office there, so you can't find the social value manager or the person responsible for CSR. So it's really hard to get anything going in terms of that. Our borough council has cut back all their non-statutory spending, so they've got rid of all the hanging baskets now, and so there's a bit of a feeling, a bit of an undercurrent, well, why should we pay for it as businesses if the local council isn't even going to pay for it? And there is still some lack of awareness around what the problem actually is and why this is useful. So Guildford actually has the highest nitrogen dioxide levels in England. The stretch of A3 that runs through Guildford is way higher than everywhere else. I already mentioned our biodiversity decline rate. So there's definitely a piece around more information and more engagement, but that still doesn't necessarily help in delivering some of these solutions. So what I sort of came here, rather than just running through what we're doing, is to try and ask some of these questions, how we actually get around this. So how can we look at funding maybe as another collaborative bid for something like this? How could we potentially together explore, social value pots, which is you hardly ever get just money from social value. The companies write into contracts that they come out and volunteer, which to a volunteer organisation with a couple of hundred volunteers isn't that useful a lot of the time. How we can better sell green blue infrastructure interventions when the companies don't potentially think they get a huge amount out of it. And how we do large-scale things. So if you look at places like Medellin, for example, they've done some amazing stuff there, but obviously our planning laws over here aren't, apologies to anyone in planning here, but they're not really set up to put large-scale interventions like that in. So I think there's a lot of issues. Obviously, there's some great stuff happening, but there's a lot of issues in actually making it take off at large scale. So yeah, that's kind of what I sort of came here to leave people with a thought of is how we actually do this, and like because they're expensive as well, how we could maybe do some of this more DIY style. So the gate that you saw at Sandfield, that cost $7,500 just to put the thing in. You've got to do I've lost the word, but the tests on the lump post pillars to make sure they're structurally sound. Anything that hangs, you've got to do all those extra tests. The plants from that Prashant mentioned came from a local councillor, so that was on top of the $7,500. So how can we maybe look at more homemade solutions that still work, still do the job, but might be more affordable to put into place? So sorry to be less positive than some of the other talks, but those are the questions I'm going to leave you with.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, so much. I think many points for later discussion then. And then we have our third speaker of this session, Eleanor Starkey from Northumbria University. Just here backwards.
Yes, thank you. Yes, hi. So my name's Eleanor Starkey. I'm from Northumbria University, which is based up in the northeast in Newcastle. I know the other speakers have sort of said what the organisation does. I didn't think there was point in me saying what a university does. We do teaching and research. So I thought I'd do something a bit more specific in terms of what my research is. Assuming that this works. Okay, so I'm interested in water quality and water quantity. I go out and I measure stuff with rain gauges, water level, velocities, flows. I chase storms, I model, and I do very technical things. I've then moved into nature-based solutions, which from a rural perspective, natural flood management, but then also urban, so that's sustainable drainage systems. So it falls nicely under the conference topic. And these are just some of the examples I'm interested in. But I did a PhD back in 2013 to 2016, which focused on community-based methods, so predominantly citizen science, which got me thinking about knowledge exchange and how useful and interested participants are. And I guess my research has moved on from there now a bit in terms of it's not community-based, it's more community-led. And I'm interested in blue-green infrastructure or sustainable drainage, where we are obviously trying to slow, store and filter water at source, but can we have the community involved in that whole process? And the reason for that is because there's a lot of research out there that says that it's a good thing to have sustainable drainage, but it needs to be scaled up rapidly, and we need people on board and we need stakeholders taking in what we're doing and appreciating and designing it so that we're maximising the multiple benefits. So it's kind of going back from Suds, moving it back to nature-based solutions. We want as many benefits as possible. So from that, this has led to a project called Suds Plus, so that's Sustainable Drainage Systems Plus. I'm going to tell you a bit about that and focusing on the research, the engagement aspect of it specifically. So Suds Plus is a 5 or 6 year project. It's one of 25 projects funded by DEFRA, and these are all of our partners, from consultants to councils. It's led by Durham County Council up in the northeast. We've got universities involved, innovators, water companies, Environment Agency. It's there really to, yes, we want to implement sustainable drainage and we're going to go through that process, but at the same time we're doing research and we're pulling out innovation. So the funding is there to try and think of different ways of doing flood risk management in a very different way to what we're used to, and capture our learnings as we're going along. So that means for us, we bringing in the community element. We've decided we're going to turn sustainable drainage and the process of design, implementation, monitoring and management upside down. And instead of thinking from a drainage lens, we're thinking about it from a community lens. So that kind of gives that urban sustainability, resilient community aspect. So ignore flooding, ignore drainage, think about all of the other elements that sustainable drainage could bring, or nature-based solutions. So it's many of the things that people have been talking about today: trees, mental health, well-being, air quality. What other things can we maximise? And it's asking the communities directly, what do you want? And designing it in that way, and then later on weaving back in flood risk into the design. So that means that we're sort of enabling multi-purpose suds, and we're not just saying it's got multiple purpose, we're actually trying to do it. So this flow chart, I have got a poster downstairs as well. So in terms of the process, it's quite complicated. So just to make it really quick and summarise it, we're basically working with the community to prioritise and find locations. So that was the first couple of phases, which I'm going to talk to you about. Those prioritisations from the community move into the design phase, which has been led by Durham County Council. And then after that, when we've done some co-design with the community and it's been implemented, we have other project partners involved in having the community element integrated into the monitoring aspect, maintenance and adoption. We've only done the first few phases, as I mentioned, so I'll tell you about those. And similar to the previous talks, engagement has been difficult. We have other activities going on as well, so we've got innovation strand, and we have engagement with schools and an education programme around that, and also environmental volunteering, and this is just to help people get involved in different ways with the project. So just thinking on in terms of the location, the study area location, so this I mentioned based up in the northeast. Our study area is Stanley, just south of Stanley. So Stanley is an old mining community. It was built for that. The houses were built for that reason, and the population expanded massively in the 1800s into early 1900s. And as the pits closed, everything's gone dilapidated. It's one of a very high social deprivation locations. And whilst, as you can see on the map, community locations collected through citizen sites, we do have locations that are known to flood. It's definitely not a priority. So we've been into this community and we've asked them, what do you like about the community? What do you not like about the community? And then also, where would you like to see change and improvement? So I'll just give you a few examples of how we've done that. So the first bit of work was really a pilot with just a small number of volunteers, 15, and they came up with a list of aspirations, I guess a broader framework, what they felt they wanted the end goals to be. So there's 7 vision statements on the left-hand side on the screen, ranging from sort of community ownership, better jobs, education, better housing, all the usual sort of stuff that you would expect with a cost of living. The top left one, the pink one, that's the one that's flooding, and that did come up, but we wanted that in there sort of to test how the engagement went. And then it was last year we kind of opened this up to the wider community, and we asked them to vote with stickers. They got to choose their top 3, and it was no surprise that they all came out top except number 1 with flooding, which kind of validated our approach that if you talk to communities in a different way, you don't say the word drainage, you're likely to get people more on board, and you're likely to design and implement something that's more meaningful and multi-purpose. So after that, we asked people for their ideas for improvement and investment. So that's the map on the left-hand side. That was 383 ideas that were created, dots on the map and actual ideas. We did that through walking tours, workshops, and there was an online form that didn't work very well. People liked that face-to-face interaction. Of the project. They also knitted them, so I've got a couple of knitted Stanley the Raindrops downstairs with my poster if you want to have a look. But it's been a really successful thing. Obviously it's less important to me as a researcher, but it's been an icon for the community, and it helps them to understand what the project's about and see that on material, or it pops up everywhere, and it seems to have been quite a mascot for the wider DEFRA programme as well. From the 383 ideas, I've come up with a coding framework, and I've painfully gone through every single answer from everyone, which was from things like dog bins right through to demolish a whole street, to drive-through cinemas, to we would like a zoo. Obviously, some of these are unrealistic, and you've got to carefully balance these sorts of things, but there was a lot in between. And so I came up with 46 themes. I'll see if I can point out. So this one here, that is flooding there. So just one of the boxes of the 46 is flooding, which was what I'm interested in, and most of the team, but everything else is not that. And I wanted to highlight that if we didn't do it in this way, we would never been able to come up with that many ideas and themes that people really are interested in on the ground. Many of these, like I mentioned before, cross over with a lot of the work that's been done and talked about today. Litter, antisocial behaviour is a big thing that comes up and just general maintenance. Wildflowers were very popular, reducing dog fouling as well. So these were then narrowed down to 12 ideas, and we call them the Suds Plus concepts. So these are entirely driven by the community aspirations, nothing to do with drainage. The community voted on them. Voting was very low. We put 9,000 leaflets out and got 145 responses back. And so this has made it quite hard to then narrow it down further. But these concepts are sort of, the descriptions are based on the community, and they're very broad to help people understand them. So when they got their leaflet, we wanted them to be able to say which one they liked and which one they didn't. We've learned that some methods haven't worked and some methods have worked better. And we did have things up in community centres, food banks, different locations where people could get involved on paper version or just to talk about it, and we recorded them. That's where we've got to in terms of the engagement, and so those concepts, once they've been voted on, it's now been passed on to the council, and so they're physically going to implement some of those locations that the community have asked for based on the community aspirations and descriptions, and then they will weave that flood risk design back in. Co-design has got a different meaning to everybody, so it'll be interesting in terms of the research to see how much the council does actually engage with the community. Just my last slide is just to go through some of my key findings. So flood and drainage, as I mentioned, was not a priority for the community, despite the fact that some people have flooded. Face-to-face engagement works better. We have online tools, but they didn't seem to work very well at all. Branding and Stanley the Raindrop has been really successful. We couldn't have done this work without a local NGO, so the Rivers Trust has been that key person on the ground connecting people. I won't lie, engagement is a lengthy process, but I'd say it's very rewarding, and you do get those localised solutions that come out the other end. The Suds Plus approach enables a wider angle, so we are not just thinking of drainage, we're thinking right across the whole spectrum of nature-based solutions when we do it in this way. When the community have prioritised the solutions on the ground, it was interesting to see that they chose the ones that were existing spaces rather than create something from scratch. So I don't know whether that's because they couldn't think beyond the idea of something that wasn't already there, or whether they don't physically want new things outside their houses, but they were interested in just those parks exist, but we'd like a lot more from them. We'd like them maintained, cleaned, be better. Engagement, as I mentioned, was a lot lower than we expected, but those that have been involved were very engaged, and we feel that this will improve once we get more down as a street level and we have specific schemes included. And also everyone has their own view on what engagement is, and the degree of that will vary depending on the community that you work with. So I don't think it should be just one framework. I think the framework should have a scale, and it should be, some communities might accept a small amount, others might be a lot further on, more on that empowerment aspect. Yep, and that's me. So I've mentioned poster downstairs, and we've got quite a lot of resources on the website.
Eleanor, thank you very much for the very comprehensive presentation on a wide range of activities and your research. The next speaker is Louise Purnell from Trees for Cities. Apologies. Yeah. So, please.
Okay, so good afternoon, I think we're at now, everybody. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about our kind of lessons from our community engagement activities that we do at Trees for Cities. So I'm Louise. I'm Senior Engagement Manager at Trees for Cities, so I sort of started working on our schools projects and now over what we call our urban forest programme. So I'll just start off with a little bit of a kind of overview of some of the work that we do at Trees for Cities. We've got lots of different strands of work. We do our... Where are we? Where should I start? We've got our corporate services programme, which is about corporate volunteering opportunities, which supports all our planting activities. We have our international work, which is more of a kind of hands-off but supporting work abroad. We have our Trees for Streets programme, which is a sponsorship programme. It's quite a new scheme, and it's about encouraging the public to propose sites for local trees on their streets and suggest the sites and then being involved in them, they're being planted. We've got our Trees for Schools project, which is a huge amount of work. We've got about 45 schools projects this year. I think a huge number, I can't remember exactly the number we've done so far. But these projects are a whole range of different projects. So we've got Suds projects, we've got planting healthy air projects, we call them. We've got historically a huge amount of edible playgrounds, which are school growing projects, and our Trees in Schools projects. So a lot of work in schools, and all of that sort of work is really designed about encouraging the whole school community to be involved, looking at ways that the planting interventions can be incorporated into their school curriculums and their learning. So we support the schools projects over a year of engagement, so from the very beginning through to, from their first sort of design, working as much as we can, co-design in various forms, and then into throughout the planning and the planting of the project, they're getting involved in the planting, and then on throughout the year, through usually a whole school year, and sometimes longer. So that's our schools project. And then moving on to our urban forest programme, which is what I'm going to sort of talk about a bit more really today. So this is kind of a lot of core work we do. We do about 15 projects this year we're doing, and lots more. That's just in London, so lots more outside of London. So there are a whole range of different types of projects. They have like multi-year estates projects. We have lots of individual standards and whip planting projects of varying sizes in urban parks and open spaces. So I'm going to go on. There's just a few examples of some of our projects for the urban forest. So all of the different schemes of, like, all of the different projects have a kind of similar approach to them. We do a lot of projects, so we have sort of in some ways a kind of standardised way of approach to everything. But obviously it's dependent on the different objectives, the scope, the budget and the time frame for the different projects. But this is kind of some of our gold standard, and we apply as much as we can these sort of principles. So we usually start off with our kind of community mapping. So when we have our first projects, we have a largely kind of desk-based exercise where we really look at identifying the local groups and local organisations. Is there friends of groups, parts groups, local community groups, what schools are near? And we look quite closely, so we start at a real kind of about 1 kilometre radius around wherever the planting intervention is going to be happening. We obviously look at if there's other local charities or other organisations. We look at ways of communicating to people in that area. Is there local websites, forums, etc., and really understanding the local demographic, anything specific about that area, and really sort of ensuring we're being as inclusive as we possibly can, and making time to hear all the sort of quieter voices. So we look at our next sort of phase is looking at the use of what the site is, how it's currently being used, and sort of assessing what the impact is going to be of the project. And it's really then that's informing our next steps of the project. So, and the next steps move into where we start our sort of community outreach. And this is really at an early stage, and ideally, as much as possible, we look at it to begin before any intervention has happened. So we'll be looking at talking to people about the potential project that we're going to be doing in that area, looking at any general concerns they might have, any ideas, trying to understand more about the history and aspirations of the local community in that area. So it's really getting sort of early buy-in, and then maybe even some volunteers for future work. And so after that, this is where we kind of also start at this stage as well, site visits. So we'll start going to actually talk to people and identifying like how we're going to communicate with them, what's going to be the best method to use. We use all sorts of different types of activities. So it might be flyering people, we might be literally knocking on doors, We might be just putting posters up. We'd always have a website with information about it. We might have sort of meetings, all sorts of attend meetings that are already sort of happening, have small stalls at events, etc. So we'd kind of identify what's going to be the best approach depending on the area. And that really does help us sort of identify any early issues that we might not have been aware of sort of from the desktop research. So then we start, slightly strange slide. So then we start looking at our community consultation really actively begins. So at that time we're starting to share initial designs. So whilst we've been doing the initial engagement, our design team has been sort of looking at all the different, like getting an initial design together. So at this point we'll start talking to people, showing them the designs, getting their feedback, and really ensuring that we leave as much time as possible to be able to take that feedback into consideration and make any changes that are needed before we then go back again to share final designs in a number of different ways depending on what's going to be appropriate for that area. So again, it might be putting up sort of posters, might be putting leaflets, might be talking to people directly. And wherever possible, we do, to different extents, try and involve community in some aspect in sort of some of the choices that are being made about perhaps what species, what materials might like to be used, is there any other interventions that are needed, perhaps around sort of benching, etc. So that is sort of our next stage 3. And at that stage, we're also beginning to start planning for our kind of planting activities. So this is a lot based on our research as well, that having people involved in the planting itself really does impact on the ownership and the long-term support for any of our projects. So we have, usually we have a range of different kind of opportunities for people to get actively involved. So it might be that we have workshops, school workshops, working with community groups, primary schools coming out, lots of days, workshops with local organisations coming out to plant, and then we usually have a large planting event. So these big events where we get as many people as locally as possible to come out and be planting the trees on the day. So, I won't go into all the considerations for planting, like the planting events, but obviously we kind of, mostly important is lots of nice curry available on the day for lunch. We have our planting events, and then we look at how we're going to be carrying on that engagement with communities. So we are doing more and more of our focus is becoming beyond the planting event itself, looking at maintenance activities that we can run, doing weeding and mulching and other activities afterwards. Also looking at further training, encouraging like local groups, even established, or trying to encourage connections of people to do have friends groups or community, join a group that's going to be able to help support the long-term sustainability of the project. So they might be doing some training, maybe on establishment checks or pruning or whatever's needed, maintenance activities. And it's something that we're trying to do, really enhance that massively this year. So yeah, we are still growing, and obviously we've done a huge amount of projects. We've many more projects this year. And we're looking at some of the ways that we want to develop. We're starting a new engagement strategy at the moment, so we're really focusing on our next steps and how we further improve our community engagement. Set my own timer, so I know that I've got to 10 minutes. So yeah, we're going to be here today. So yeah, lots more for us to do. It's going to be exciting. Sort of, this is our 30th year at Trees for Cities. So we're really trying to focus more this year. And we have lots of projects running. So my kind of message is, please do come and talk to us. We have these things happening. So if you want to work with us or can see ways to work with us, then we would love to talk to you. So that's it. I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Louise, thank you so much for the overview from Trees for Cities. Now we have the final speaker of our session, Jason Williams from Cloud Gardener. Jason, please come up. Oh yeah, take a picture first, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Jason. So my name is Jason Williams, also known as the Cloud Gardener. And you're probably wondering, well, what on earth is a cloud gardener? What does that even mean? Well, I asked myself that too, but I actually started gardening on my balcony during lockdown in 2020, and I happen to live on the 18th floor in Manchester. And before I started gardening, I knew absolutely nothing about horticulture, nothing. But there was a time, if you cast your minds back, where the only thing that we could do was either go to Aldi or go to B&Q. And so I used to take one of my daily trips to B&Q, and I picked up a couple of plants and I put them out on my balcony, and unfortunately they unalived themselves, as I called it. So I decided to put a little bit of time and effort into understanding why my plants unalived themselves, since at the time I was on furlough. And I recall looking around and there was no information. I was trying to watch Gardener's World. I was trying to have a look online and see what information was out there for people with small spaces. But when you think about gardening, gardening is always about people with these huge outdoor spaces, and there was nothing reflected in my space. So it took me a little bit of time, and took me around about a year or so for me to get to grips with my space. And then I was still in furlough, so I decided out of boredom to create a social media platform, a YouTube channel. That's how it started. And I was looking back two weeks ago, actually, and my very first video was how do you grow bare root lupins from Wilco's. So, so that's how I started, but I think maybe you should see my balcony. Yeah, this is not going to be a boring talk, guys. So, my balcony is on the 18th floor in Manchester. It's south-southwest facing, and on my garden I grow passion fruits, melons, cucumbers, chilies, kiwis, lemons, limes, all sorts of different herbs, and I even have 3 ponds, including a fish pond. Interestingly enough, actually, the fish pond, I use the fish pond water to fertilize my garden. So actually, I keep everything as organic as possible. Now, as you can see, the garden is very, very full. And I'm going to answer this now because I know one of the questions is going to be, Jason, how does nothing fall off and kill anybody? So if you have a look, you'll see we've got the glass railing there, and it goes all the way past the top of those pots, so nothing does fall off. Yeah, you see? Yeah, I thought so. I could see the looks of concerns, the HRs. No, look, we're very... quite often. Well, that's because the garden has this glass railing. Now, that glass railing actually acts almost the same as a greenhouse. So my garden ends up being 10 to 15 degrees warmer than it is on ground level on a sunny day. So when we think about all the plants that we see on social media, the gardens that we see on social media, a lot of the time I was trying to recreate what I was seeing there, when in actual fact, a whole load of those plants were not working in my space. So I had to change and adapt my planting to plants that did work in my space, hence the tomatoes, hence the chilies. And I can say that even in reverse, during winter, the glass almost acts as a cold frame. So for the past 3 years in a row, I've been able to harvest tomatoes on Christmas Day. Now, I swiftly learned that actually, in order to get the most out of my garden, I needed to incorporate some form of floral planting into my garden, because I ended up having to do a whole lot of pollination on my garden myself. Now, believe it or not, I do have pollinators that come to my garden, and my number one pollinator is not actually a bee. In fact, it's not even a butterfly. I've never even seen a butterfly in my garden. However, my number one pollinator is actually a fly. So a lot of my planting is designed on my garden to attract flies to my garden in order to pollinate it. My number one pollinator is actually the hoverfly. Has anybody been to the RHS Chelsea Flower Show before? So I had... The silence was deafening. So in 2021, I visited the RHS Chelsea Flower Show, and it was the very first year that they had balcony and container gardens. And they were absolutely amazing, beautiful. And at the time, I didn't realize that show gardens at flower shows are, in essence, works of art. The designer's ability to have no client and to have free reign on the design, which is a rarity. So they were really, really beautiful, but there was grass growing up through pavements on the balcony floor. There were giant oak trees, all these amazing things. And I was like, well, that does not look like my garden. So I decided to create a design that was based off my own balcony, actually, and was just a little bit Chelseafied. So the color palette for this garden was based on the sunset that I see on my garden. And I'm very quite open on my social media with the fact that actually I find gardening very, very therapeutic. It helps me with my mental health. I'm not ashamed to say that actually I struggle with anxiety and imposter syndrome and depression. And I find that actually going out into my garden really, really helps me with my mental health, even if it's just the idea of growing from seed and seeing these new shoots coming up, or looking at the wildlife that appear in my garden. And I often think to myself, what if more people in our towns and cities knew that they could create gardens like mine? Imagine if our cities became greener. So I created this garden. It's called the Cirrus Garden, and I submitted it, and I didn't hear back from the RHS. So I was like, okay, cool. I tried. Then on the very last day of January in 2022, I got an email to tell me that I was successful and that my very first meeting would be the 1st of February. And my first thought was, oh, shit. And here it is. So this is the Cirrus Garden. And the garden was designed for renters, which was unheard of at Chelsea because they didn't realize that people are poor. So, sorry, I'm going to get into so much trouble. So this garden was full of planting that actually you could find in a normal garden centre, i.e. B&Q or your normal nursery, which again was unheard of. However, it was really important to me to be accessible, and all of the plants that you see here are plants that I've grown before on my balcony. So should anyone want to replicate what it is that I had done, they were able to use my planting list and then create their very own balcony. I even had a very special royal visitor. So the first thing that Her Majesty the Queen said when she called me over, I was the only garden in the balcony and container garden section that she spoke to, and the first thing that she said was, I do quite like your roses. So, so I was very lucky. I won a silver gilt medal, and thank you. And I didn't quite win gold. I just by 1 or 2 points missed out on winning a gold medal. But as far as I was concerned, I won gold because I had the royal seal of approval. Since then, I've gone on to design gardens for other people. I've now created gardens for developers as well. This is a garden I designed for Legal and General, actually, 3. So these are 3 balconies on the 35th floor in my hometown of Croydon. And, Croydon's never looked so green. Now, I gave the developer 3 different types of gardens. So we've got a garden based on wildlife. We have one about essentially simplicity. So with the table and chairs, all of the planting there is perennial, come back year after year, but is extremely low maintenance. And then I showed how you could create an edible garden as well on the 35th floor. That led me to this year. So this year I created a garden at the RHS Urban Show. So it was actually the feature garden. And it was all about, for me, my question was, how do we make our towns and cities greener? So I created a whole development, like you do, along this aisle. I had not one, not two, not three show gardens. I had 7 altogether. 4 of them happened to be balconies, and they were facing north, east, south, and west. And the goal was to show people who came to the show what you could do in a small space. Now, a Chelsea balcony show garden costs in the region of £20,000 to £70,000 to create, which is all really achievable. But with my 4 balconies, I created them with students from Manchester Metropolitan University. Not a single one of them studied horticulture. And for 2.5 months, I did a 2-hour session with them, training them on what is a seed, what's an annual, all the way up to how do you design a space. I then gave them a budget of £500 and said, go create me a show garden for £500. The goal is to actually get communities and local residents engaged. You cannot tell somebody in the city that they need to spend £50,000 to create a balcony when they're going to move in 12 months' time as a renter. So by showing people what they could do with £500 to create their own balcony, I think was really, really reasonable. Now, garden number 6 was all about developers. And what I have been doing is reaching out to developers, and I'm very, very lucky that with my platform has now created some kind of PR buzz. So this garden was designed to show developers that in actual fact what they could do is create allotment spaces within their developments. And the feedback that I was getting from the developers is, in actual fact, we don't want that because it creates a mess. And I said, okay. So I created this garden to show how beautiful that could be. And then the question becomes, how do you fund it? Because the developers don't want to fund it. I recall speaking to one developer, and one developer said that they don't want to do this because it would create a PR disaster for them. And I said, why is that? And for them, they said that the PR disaster would be that it looks like they would be offsetting the costs of the management of these green spaces to the community. And so I said, well, it's never bothered you before about upsetting a community, so why does this bother you now? The look of shock on their face. But what I said to them is, you put all of these units down below. You've put in a Tesco's, you put in a Starbucks, you put in an independent. Why do you not just charge them £50 a month and then reallocate that money back to the community so the community could then grow? If you have green spaces within your developments, they're communal courtyards, what if, rather than that boring, crappy car park planting that you use, you create edible gardens in there that then you have community groups here that could take them over? So these are ideas that I'm posing to the developers, and I've got one video and then I'm being shooed off. So if it will work, yeah. There's lots to get through. Okay, well, it looks like we have no video today, but that's fine. We can talk more when we get downstairs.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for the very engaging talk. I believe everyone is now reviewing their own garden activities. I have some bad news. So due to time constraints, we cannot hold the panel session. So please approach the speakers during the lunch break. And that is also the good news, because you can just head straight away to lunch. I would like to thank all the speakers for staying really on time. We started already a little bit late, and then now we're catching up during the lunch break to stay on time. And then everyone, please enjoy your lunch. And thank you so much for the very informative session in the morning. Sorry, there's one announcement from Prashant.